See, he was an amateur then. I still look at these photos, the memories, they still special, man. And to witness, like, what Ray even doing right now was a part of our strategy, even back then, you know what I mean? I remember in that contract, the last contract with HBO, I remember negotiating for him to commentate, not only in the ring, so we planned the exit for his career, which, you know, is like confirmation that he was thinking ahead, and as a manager, I was listening. So it's like no accident that he's able to do what he's doing right now. It's part of what he wanted to. And this is what we do, you know, when you really plan and you believe in yourself and you execute the things you believe in, it shows that, you know, fighters and people from the hood, we're not just one-dimensional people. We call it diversifying our portfolio. You know, he could be president if he wanted to be.
Man, welcome back to another episode of The Art of War. And today I got somebody who's not just a guest, but he's family. He's many things to many people. He's a mogul. He's the owner and founder of Rap-A-Lot Records. He's a manager. He's a shrewd businessman. And God has used this man in a powerful way in his community in Fifth Ward, Texas, and around the world to touch many people and to be a blessing to many people. He's the godfather of the South. I want to welcome my brother to the show, James Prince.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. This is long overdue.
Yeah,
long
for
overdue,
real.
man. I appreciate the time, and you know, I'm gonna get straight into it, man. We know a little bit more about you now since you came out with the book, The Art and Science of Respect, and you've been on many platforms discussing your story, and you know, I think that was a powerful, powerful thing because people see the man, but they don't know the story. So I appreciate you, you know, penning that letter to the world and just, you know, sharing that just your story.
Yeah. No, and it's a privilege and an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a
for
long
real.
time coming.
Yeah.
Man, I want you to take it back, man. Like, what was young James Prince like in elementary school and middle? What type of dude were you growing up?
Oh, man. How would I describe myself growing up? A hustler, you know. I remember myself being a kid with like a uncanny love for money, you know, and I know how to save it, unlike all the kids that was my age. You know, I was hustling, cutting grass, you know, I had chickens, I was selling eggs,
Shooting
you
dice.
know, yeah, shooting dice, you know what I mean? Any kind of way, you know, I could make money, you know, I was trying to have some money in my pocket.
You talk in the book about, you know, seeing poverty all around you, experiencing poverty. It's a lot of people, just say in America, that have poverty all around them, generational poverty, and it's really nothing in them that wants them to get up and go change it or break that generational curse. And you talk about that. What was the origin of you saying, I want to be something different and do something different?
You know, as I spoke about in my book, you know, I witnessed a lot of pain, you know, growing up in my household where all of my family was concerned. You know, I witnessed like people crying because the bills was, you know, being cut off, being evicted out of the house. You know, I was a kid that didn't have meals every day. You know, sometimes I learned how to eat sugar on my bread and water with my cereal. You know what I mean? It made it appear to be like milk was on those cereals. So it was the constant death, you know, witnessing, you know, my family members dying from lack of help, being able to get, you know, proper help from the doctors and different things. So it all impacted me in a strong way.
Now, your mother, she was real young. You know, she had your sister, is it Zenia?
Zena.
Zena?
Yeah.
At 15, I believe, and she had you at 16, and y'all grew up in the Coke apartments, but they also called it the Bloody Nickel.
Yeah.
And that's in Fifth Ward.
Right.
What was that like growing up with a mother that young? She's a kid with kids.
Yeah, you know, I don't remember her being a kid. Interesting. You know, I just remember my mother being a hard worker, And, I can remember the seeds that she planted in me as a kid, wanting to get out of those projects, saying to me, I wish I could, have my own house one day. And, me and my sister, we would, of course, go to school in the morning, then we would come home and be by ourselves up until nighttime before she came home from work. So I just witnessed a hard-working woman, man, that, she became my hero.
What's the story with your pops, man? Was your pops around? Did you know him? Was he in the community? Was he in your life?
Yeah, I had I had a combination of fathers that helped shape and mold me, and a few of them was my stepfather. But they were like, real hard-working, proud men that planted a work ethic in me, even as a kid that I think saved my life to this day. So,
Okay.
I tapped into my biological father, after I got grown, and
You
that
hadn't
was,
seen him before you became grown?
I seen him, but I didn't know who he was. You know what I mean? As I wrote in the book, I didn't really know who he was, and I was told he wasn't my biological father. So I went almost half a life, not anymore,
Come
but
on.
I went a long time without, knowing that truth. But it was life-changing once I found out who he was, and once I tapped into the Prince side of the family. It really was like a missing puzzle in my life where I didn't know who I was, but to meet that side of the family, I quickly tapped into who I was.
What you think it is about that generation, man? Like, them kind of secrets or them kind of issues where it's like, I remember the football player Terrell Lawrence, his daddy lived down the street
Yeah,
for years. He didn't know.
yeah.
And it's like that kind of stuff where that's my daddy, I heard it's my daddy, I don't know if it's really, that's some heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's heavy, and I think it has a lot to do with a lack of education where a lot of those people are concerned. Like, for example, where my mom was concerned, I think she was kind of going that direction because the man that she told me was my biological father was a hard-working man that provided and took care of me. Okay. You know what I mean? So I think it was a token of love with her, making that decision. But, the truth is always better, I
Truth is
feel.
always better.
Yeah.
Is your father still living?
No, my father died at 55. My stepfather that raised me died at 44. Yeah.
But you was able to make peace with Pops and forgive him and get that right before he passed?
Oh man, most definitely. He and I had opportunity to spend a lot of time together. I fell in love with him, because I was him. He was, you know what I mean? And to witness those genetics, man, is a powerful thing. So I always advise everybody to really tap in and know your bloodline and who your people are, because I almost dated my sister. You know what I mean? So imagine that. I'm in junior high school looking at my sister and her cousin. Her cousin ended up having my second child for me. So it came that close because I didn't know.
You didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that forgiveness thing is big, man, for closure. I know it's easy, in a situation like that. My situation was different. My mother wasn't there, my father was there, but it's easy to hold on to that stuff and keep that bitterness and that unforgiveness going, but it's a powerful thing to release it. Because a lot of times, not to say it's an excuse, but them parents and stuff that wasn't there, sometimes when you start really digging, you see the addiction there. It's like, man, I did not want to be there. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And to be able to give them that blessing of forgiveness and enjoy the later years of their life, it's a powerful thing.
Oh man, it was a real blessing to me. And as you saying, it's, even against, say for example, like my mother, my grandmother, them, felt like this man didn't do anything for me. How could you be blessing him the way you blessing him today with houses and cars and different things like that? And, I understand the scripture, honor your mother and your father. And it don't say if they do this or whatnot, it just say honor them. So, I was obedient to that. And I think I was blessed, man, for giving him not only where he was concerned, but for myself.
Yeah. How you feel like the way you were raised shaped you as a father? are you saying, man, I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna be different? Or how has that shaped you just as a father in general, just the way you was raised?
You know, it was a learning experience, you know, over time of evolving and really what helped me a whole lot is the scripture, you know what I mean, with all my decisions in life. But, you know, when you know better, you're supposed to do better. So, you know, through my journey of, you know, in life, I learned to be a better father, you know, things that I may not have witnessed in the household that my wife at the time taught me, and like, yo, this is the godly thing to do. You know what I mean? So I was a student, you know, because I wanted to be the best father I could be to my family.
And tell me about your faith, because, you know, down in that Bible Belt, man, in the South, if you don't do nothing else, you going to church,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But how did you find a personal relationship with Jesus Christ where this ain't just a thing I do on Sundays, but man, I'm trying to walk this out every day in my life and communicate with him every day?
You know, that was an interesting thing with me, because I remember the bus coming to the projects, and my mother wouldn't go to church with me, but she would send me on that bus. And, you know, I believe at a young age of 8, 9 years old, is some kind of connection that, you know, from hearing that preacher. Now, I would go to Sunday school sometime, but didn't mean as much. But this pastor, Reverend C.L. Jackson, you know, my spirit connected to him in I think an abnormal way compared to the people that was my age, because wasn't nobody else going to church with me. You know what I mean? In the hood, I found myself, you know, after I moved out the projects, you know, catching the city bus to go myself, because I was so in love
Really?
with, yeah, like hearing the wisdom that was coming from this man's mouth. So it was real different for me to be so young.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been with you all these years.
Stay with me, and the things I heard, I put into action. And, you know, I could testify today that I was rewarded for a lot of wisdom that was spoken from the pulpit. You know, it carried me through a lot of storms, you know, even though I got off track, but those words was so sound and real with me until I came back, just like the words say.
Now, your book, man, you know, tragedy struck the family. You know, you talk about your sister, losing your sister, man. She here today, gone tomorrow. And you talk about how the night before y'all had sort of an abnormal conversation that lasted a long time. Can you tell me about that and then actually what happened?
Yeah, that was an interesting night. My sister was 12 years old when she passed. I was 11. I was in the 6th grade. She was in the 7th grade. That particular night, our last night together, I remember us staying up to like 1 o'clock in the morning, which was really abnormal for us because we normally be in bed by 10 or something like that. But she and I stayed up, you know, talking about what we wanted to be when we got grown, and what we wanted to do for my mother when we got grown.
I think the
And
chapter was a house in a vacuum
yeah,
in the
house
book.
in a
Yeah.
vacuum, because that was her goal. You know, she used to have more chores than I did around the house, so she wanted a vacuum cleaner. She said, when I get grown, I'm gonna buy mother a vacuum cleaner.
Tired of sweeping.
Right, so I said, well, I'm gonna buy her a house, you know what I mean? Because the seed was planted in me that I want my own house one day. So that morning we got up and, you know, going to school like we normally do. And my sister would always get dropped off first because her school was closer. And she would kiss my mother, but she normally wouldn't kiss me. But she stole a kiss from me
She got one.
that morning. And, you know, that afternoon after I got out of school, I was playing football in the prayer in the hood. And I saw students coming from school, and a few of them was like, your sister got ran over by a train. So I'm thinking, you ain't talking about my sister. And a few others, your sister got ran over by a train. So I'm like, where? Say up there on the track. So I ran toward, you know, the accident. And when I got there, they had already taken her. But I remember the coat that she had on, and I saw like her flesh, you know, meet with her coat. And that's what made me like confirm, like, yo, this is real. She had this coat on. But by that time they had took her to the hospital, and what had happened was she got ran over by a train and literally like got cut in half, you know, with her leg and her arm off.
Man.
And yeah, they rushed her to the hospital and she passed, I think, 3 or 4 days after that.
Man.
Yeah.
Is that a route she normally would take?
Yeah, we go that route, but my mom, you know, told us to, when it's a train, because I was a boy, so I was always jumping trains, and I used to go feed hobos, and, you know, I called myself being a good servant. You know, I was feeding hobos and everything on those tracks. So she warned me in front of my sister, don't cross those trains, this and that. But my sister was walking home with a friend of hers, and her friend, the train in the ghetto, they'll stop on the track and just sit there like an hour. You know what I mean? Just making everybody late. And her friend hopped and crossed the train and told her to come over. And when my sister got on the train to cross it, it jerked real hard, and she fell between the carts and hit her head, and yeah, it all went bad.
Man, how old were you at that time?
I was 11.
11. Jay, how you recover from something like that? How did you deal with something like that?
You know, that was, I think that was traumatizing to me. You know, I probably, in this day and time, should have got some type of therapy or whatnot, but it was a devastating blow. And how I know it was a devastating blow is after that, you know, I couldn't sleep at night. When I would try to sleep, you know, I saw her in my dreams, in my visions, and I would go to class and, you know, fall asleep in class. So it was devastating to the extent where my mother let me go and live with my grandmother. And that was the transfer of me, you know, moving with my grandmother and kind of stayed with her. I never really lived with my mother again.
You felt like that changed you though?
I felt like it helped me a lot, you know, because
No, I mean, your sister passed. You feel like that changed something in your heart?
Oh, most definitely. You know, man, it traumatized me. You know, it traumatized me, but it also made me want to get that vacuum for my mother, you know.
Harder.
And at the end of the day, you know, I end up getting a vacuum and the house for my mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made good on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's your boy Ak, and guess what? We have some great fights coming your way, and you know we had to team up with the squad, DraftKings. Look, Navarrete, one of the most exciting fighters in all of boxing. You talk about volume, right? Might have an awkward style, not too flashy or pretty, but he's gonna be on you nonstop from beginning to end. Does Charles have enough for Navarrete?
Looking at his record, no. You know, but Suarez got a tough night ahead of him. Maybe he's great, he's gonna have to show it. But as far as his record and as far as what we've seen him in the ring, it's gonna be a tough night for Suarez.
Yeah, it's safe to say that a guy that doesn't make predictions like yourself, you're predicting Navarrete is gonna beat Charles.
Sounds about right.
Oh wow, we got
Sounds
on
about right.
camera. He's
Finally.
admitting to making a prediction.
Every once in a while, I'll do that now.
Hey, check it out. This is gonna be a fight that you cannot miss. But make sure you check out what DraftKings has to offer and use the promo code ATS Fights. The crown is yours.
With so many different ways to play, DraftKings has something for every sports fan to stay in the action all night long.
Check out all DraftKings has to offer on the app or on the website. Join in on the fun right now. Download the DraftKings app.
New customers, use our promo code ATS Fights to level up your fight night experience.
You seeing the family members, you know, going to the pen, you seeing people you know, you hearing about stuff, you seeing the addiction and the drug use. When did you first start jumping off the porch and you went from making, you know, hustling to just saying that, man, I want to see what this is about? What age were you?
I think I was 9 years old when, you know, I was doing naughty things.
He said,
You know,
hold on, 9?
Yeah, you know, even at 9, because I'm surrounded by it. You know what I mean? I'm surrounded by it. So even at 9 years old, you know, I'm 9, 10, 11, I'm witnessing that these guys is paying money for marijuana. And a friend of mine, father is growing these plants. right? So I'm like, yo, sweep up these plants and, you know what I mean? So it was a mechanism of being able to have a little money, and I was about having money, right? So, you know, coming up in an environment where, you know, you're surrounded by those type of things, it's hard to escape without doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said about 9 years old.
Yeah.
What was your first real taste of respect
Well,
that came your way?
a lot of them whoopings I got was my real taste of respect, you know, being, you know, learning to do like my elders would say do, you know what I mean? And when I wouldn't, they let me know I was being disrespectful. So I remember a lot of those.
But I mean, when did you first feel like, oh, they respect me? Your first taste from that standpoint.
I think that came in my latter years after I graduated, and I decided that, you know, I wanted to play ball with the street guys a little bit. And of course, I was viewed as a minnow in the ocean of sharks. So, you know, in the hood, in ghettos, and you're familiar with this, you at some point, at some time, you're gonna have to prove some kind of way, you know what I mean, that you demand your respect. And yeah, I had to learn, definitely being at a disadvantage, being small like I am, you know, I had to learn how to think and how to think muscles, you know, meaning the bigger guys with muscles. So I figured it out.
So man, you delving into this life, you still trying to get money, you trying to better your situation. You had some jobs that you worked at. I think you worked at a bank or something, and you know, you saving your money, but then you got fired from the bank. As you get deeper into the street life, you said I don't know if you prayed this or you asked God, you had a conversation with God about making a transition. You said, if you do this, I'll do this.
Yeah.
What was that prayer like?
Yeah, you know, that was in the closet prayer. You know what I mean? When it came a point in my life where I wanted to make a transition into corporate America. And I was familiar with scripture, you know, that the Creator would give you the desires of your heart and different things like that. And with me, I wanted to be a millionaire, you know. I always
knew
wanted
that.
to be
That
a
was-
millionaire. Yeah.
It wasn't no doubt about it.
For some reason, you know, at 9, 10, 11, all the way up, you know, I felt like becoming a millionaire would break the curse or would give me the power to like end the whole poverty curses where my family was concerned. So with that being in mind, you know, and me believing that the Creator would give me the desires of my heart, you know, in that closet, I'm like, yo, this is what I'm finna do. I'm talking to him like, you know what I mean? And you say that you would give me the desires of my heart, you know, if I'm, you know, doing the right things or whatnot. So I want to challenge your word. You know what I mean? I want to see if that's so. And I'm going to honor my part of it. I'm never going to look back and do these things again. But, you know, I want to see if your word is real. So for the next 7 years, you know, with me stepping into the music industry, it was like a real test for me, a real temptational test where, you know, I'm having thoughts in my mind where I can make one move and, you know, satisfy all of this I don't have right now. So imagine like having that type of temptation, you know, in your mind, and a lot of it was on a phone number in my pocket or in my wallet that, you know, would give me access to that power. So one year riding down the freeway, I decided this number right here is temptation. You know what I mean? And I gave the Creator my word, I ain't never going back. So I tore that number up.
Okay.
And threw it out the window, you know, on the freeway, man. And what a relief, you know, because it's one thing I learned about temptation. It's not good to have it around you if you're trying to go the straight and narrow. Yeah.
So you fall in love with the music game. What was your love for music in general as you got into the game? What was it, 85, 86, 84, 85?
Yeah, I started in '86 because I always had a love for music personally. You know what I mean? I used to have a Michael Jackson voice at 9, 10 years
Yeah.
old.
Come on.
You know what I mean? Then I hit my teenage years and they changed on
It changed, though.
But I was a Motown fan. You know, I grew up in a household where, you know, my auntie, my all them was jamming Motown all the time. So I think that helped my ears as I got in the music game. But I really got in the game because of my brother, you know, and his name was Sir Rap-A-Lot. And I didn't want my brother in the streets, you know what I mean? He would rap in my ear all day, every day. So I told him, I say, hey, man, if you real about this, I'll support you in the music game. Just give me your word that you ain't gonna be in these streets. And that was my introduction. You know, of course, I got a couple other guys along with him that was skipping school, you know, and I convinced them and brought them together and called them the Ghetto Boys.
See, the thing that get me, though, is it ain't just, you know, the entrepreneurial mindset, but it's the eye for the talent. Tell me about the eye to be able to see something or somebody and say, that could work. You had UGK, you had Do or Die, you had individual artists, you know, Scarface that broke away from Ghetto Boy. You had all of that, but you had to see them at some point in time. What's that? And it's the same eye you got in boxing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a gift. You know what I mean? I think it has a lot to do with my intuition and my discernment, as well as being able to identify the human side of things like skills and talents where different artists is concerned. Like for music, for example, that was a trial and error situation because I really didn't know. So it took me a while, you know, it took me 7 years before I got a hit in music.
Really?
Yeah, 7 years of relentless hard work, you know what I mean? Staying up 2 and 3 days in a row, just like grinding and losing on every project I would put out, you know. 7 years of not having a hit. And eventually, you know, you figure things out, just like you had to do in the ring. You know, you became a champion from blood, sweat, and tears over time. And, you know, as I learned, you know, I figured out, like a lot of people would purposely give me information to fail in the music game.
Come on, man.
A cutthroat business, oh yeah.
It's worse than boxing?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's cutthroat. You know, they twins. Yeah, they twins.
How often are you wrong in music, boxing, business? Well, man, that ain't the right investment. How often are you wrong?
I think I may be wrong more than I'm right.
Really? Really?
You know what I mean? I had more flops than hits in music, and I had more opponents and contenders than champions in boxing.
That's true.
So that's a part of the game, though, and I think that may go on with everybody but
Just need to
Drake.
hit the right one. You need to hit the right one.
Yeah.
That'll make up for the losses.
Right.
I don't want to get too deep into this, but as you building what you building, you know, in your word, you said you were targeted by the federal government for 10 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure, bro. How you deal with that kind of pressure?
You know, and it was longer than 10 years.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was longer than 10 years. I believe I'm a target to this day, you know what I mean, because of what I accomplished and how the Creator brought me through the things. You know, I'm like a real flower that came up in the concrete. You know, I really believe that, and I know without a shadow of a doubt who brought me through. So to answer that question, how I was able to do it, I give all credit where my faith is concerned, you know what I mean? I always felt that if he be for me, the world could be against me, and I walked boldly in that. You know, I became fearless. Fear is not of God, so I couldn't allow myself to move that way in spite of, you know, feeling like the United States of America versus James Prince was, you know what I mean? That's a hell of a feeling to have such a a monster like that wanting to get you, but in the midst of it all, you know, God brought me through. You know what I mean? His favor was on me, and it's still on me to this day.
And you speak openly about it.
Oh yeah.
You name dropping, you naming the guys that did what they did and
Oh yeah.
came after you, and you know some of them guys got in trouble because they wasn't, you know,
Yeah.
living above the law and coming after you the right way.
Yeah.
And you speak openly about it.
Yeah. Now I believe in that. You know, I believe in not being fearful where that's concerned. You have to shine the light on darkness. And the things that they were doing was darkness. You know, they put a hitman on me that had killed like 7 or 8 people. You know what I mean? And this was a fact, you know. And I believe his objective was to knock me off. Yeah. And, you know, everybody know the story. You know, this guy pulled me over at nighttime and asked me to go in the back of a dark McDonald's to, you know what I mean? I'm like,
You wasn't feeling that.
I was born that night, but not last night.
I ain't going that way.
Yeah, they say pull over here, I pull over in the light. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, what's the problem? Yeah. Oh, you were swerving. No, you got the wrong man. I wasn't swerving. I don't even drink to swerve. What's the problem? How much money you got in your pocket? That's what they asked me. I said, man, you need to borrow some money or something? Why you asking me about my money? Yeah. So, you know, it went on from there, man, because I was a target and they had a plan to do what they wanted to do, but the creator had another plan.
But no charges brought on the company, on you.
No, I sit here today, I don't have a felon. You know what I mean? I'm a clean slate, you know, and I'm thankful for being able to be a clean slate with all the weapons that was pointed at me.
Man, let's get into this boxing game, man. I done heard you say many times that boxing was your first love. I thought music was your first love.
No. You know, it was an interesting thing, and this the analogy I give. I got it from Roy Jones at one of his fights. And I think we may have been there together in New Orleans when Roy kept hitting that dude in his shoulder, on his arm, and he ended up knocking his shoulder out of place. And I didn't understand that, you know what I mean? Because I'm thinking, yo, why Roy ain't digging to the body or trying to take this dude's head off? So I had a talk with Roy after that fight, and Roy left me with some profound wisdom. I said, Roy, man, why was you kept hitting that dude in his shoulder and his arm? What's the strategy behind that? He said, man, I had to take what he would give me until I could get what I want. Yeah. So when I think about the music game, I had to take what I could get until I could get where I wanted, man.
Come on.
Yeah.
Now, Don, he had a heavy influence on you, Don King.
Yeah, as a kid, you know, Don King, Muhammad Ali, you know, we would all gather around the TV, and, you know, it was mesmerizing to me to see them, you know, brothers united together in the boxing ring and different things like that, which I wanted to box. You know what I mean? I wanted to become a fighter, and it wasn't a gym in my neighborhood. So, yeah, I just loved the sport of boxing. I fell in love with it way back then.
So Don, did you talk to Don before you officially got in and became a manager?
No.
You just jumped straight in?
I just jumped straight in.
Who was your first major fighter, your first big fighter?
My first big fighter was Floyd Mayweather.
Floyd Mayweather.
You know, I remember being attacked by the feds and attacking my business every day. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, them guys was hating me so bad back then, they went through my hood and I think arrested over 100 and something people. Ooh. And it was then where I decided to diversify my portfolio versus getting up every morning to be harassed and going to my office or going to my hood to only be harassed. You know, I decided to build a boxing gym in Fifth Ward, you know, in my community, because I always say if I ever made it, I would build a boxing gym in the community. And I did that. And when I first, second, third day or whatnot, when I started going to that gym, witnessing those kids come in the gym, I decided, I'm like, yo, I love this, man. This is what I'm gonna do. And that's when I hit my knees. I remember I prayed for a champion. And I worked out I had a friend of mine that called Mike Tyson. I said, let Mike Tyson know that I want to meet with him. I want to work with him. I was that bold until I feel like, you know, I pray for something. All I have to do is step out on it, and it may come to fruition, right?
You ain't even hesitate that Mike didn't know you.
I didn't know the man. He didn't know me. You know what I mean?
But you said, I want to let Mike know I want to meet with him.
I want to meet with him. I want to be in business with Mike. Mike was the biggest back then. So my friend Tom, you know, Tom passed on now. He knew Mike, and he made the connection, and Mike accepted the meeting, and I came out here to Las Vegas and went straight to the gym. You know, I had been going to Mike fights for quite a few years, so I'm like really excited to walk into a sparring session where they like really chunking in there, and I'm just like, whoa, they going at it. So, you know what I mean, I'm a fan. I'm sitting there watching Mike trying to take this guy's head off, and in the midst of doing that, you know, Floyd, you know, walked over. He was in the gym too, and he walked over to me on a couple of occasions and like, yo, I know about Devin the Dude, Jay. You know, I know you rap a lot, woo-woo. Like, okay, I didn't know him, right? I had no idea who this kid was. So I'm like, in my mind, really, I'm like, yo, man, I'm trying to watch this sparring, man. So bam, he came over again. Yo, Jay, if you decide to go somewhere tonight, or woo-woo, it's my number, you know, call me, I'll come through and get you and all this kind of stuff, right? I'm like, cool, all right, little homie. So bam, afterwards, I go to Mike Tyson's house, and Mike, you know, we have a conversation, and I shoot the spiel at Mike. Yo, I want to be on your team. And Mike was familiar with me. I didn't know. You know, Mike was familiar with the Ghetto Boys and the whole movement. So he was impressed with me being able to do my independent thing, and we had a conversation, one that I thought was a great conversation. He even got his wife on the phone at the time of, you know, I think the lady out of D.C. who he was married to, and got on the phone and told her, I want Jay Prince to be a part of my team. So I left that meeting, you know, that night really excited, feeling like, oh, man, God didn't answer my prayer. I'm gonna be with Mike, right?
Mike, yeah.
You know, the next day, I reached out, you know, to call Mike and to get back with Mike, and all the phones disconnected. You know, I couldn't reach him. Like, man, what didn't happen? You know what I mean? Like,
he switched it up on you?
It wasn't him. It was these other powers that be, I believe.
Okay.
So I couldn't reach him, so I'm like, man, we tried all day. Rolled by the gym, it's locked down. So I'm left with that number in my pocket. I'm like, yo, who is this dude? He said, oh man, that's Floyd Mayweather. He the lightweight champion of the world. Red light, you know, go off in my head. I'm like, whoa, I prayed for a champion. So long story short, man, within the next 2 weeks, I had done a contract with Floyd Mayweather and managed him for the next 4 years.
Now I'm gonna go ahead and say this. You gotta give Al Heyman credit for what he's done in Floyd's career at a certain point. But I don't hear you brought up like I feel like you should be brought up. And I want you to speak to this. You know, when you got to Floyd's, whatever you comfortable sharing, when you got to Floyd's situation, let's just put it like this, it needed some work.
Right.
From the numbers he was getting and all these different things as opposed to what he was supposed to be getting. And I don't hear that talked about a lot, because before it was Money Mayweather, it was Pretty Boy Floyd, but you taught Floyd the money game. Me and you used to talk, and you was like, man, Floyd was always worried about, I gotta fight him, Jay. He the best. And you said, don't get caught up in the name game, get caught up in the money game.
Right.
And you really helped him restructure his situation from a business standpoint, but even personal, how he moved with his money. Can you tell me about that meeting you had where Floyd Sr. was there, and this was like the start of you saying, hey, we getting ready to change this thing, and it's gonna be different from here on out?
Yeah. That was an interesting meeting, you know, because, you know, during that time, I became a target when I started managing Floyd, you know, from the powers that be, you know what I mean? And definitely in the top rank building, because, you know, Floyd daddy and his uncle was his manager at the time. And when I came in, I saw things where Floyd should have been in control of that he wasn't. And Floyd, I told Floyd, we had a conversation. I'm like, yo, if I come in and I can't make your situation better, you don't owe me nothing. I don't want to, and I'm not here to try and, get no free ride based on what you already have.
Okay.
So, that particular meeting, what led to that meeting was the disrespect that was taking place where his father and him, speaking publicly about one another. And, me being from the South, I felt it was important. I never liked, to hear somebody, disrespecting their parent. You know what I mean? That just didn't sit right with me, no matter what the reason would be. So I called Bob and we agreed to have a meeting just to allow these guys to, come together, meeting of the mind to agree to not publicly disrespect one another. That's what I thought I was coming to a meeting for, and I got Floyd to agree to do that with me because, he never, found some type of delight in, you know what I mean? He would just respond when he was being attacked. So in this restaurant, a real nice restaurant.
Out here?
Yeah, out here in Vegas. Me, Floyd, Bob, Mayweather Sr., and Todd. These were the 5 people at this meeting. And, as we sit there, I saw a note being passed to, Floyd Mayweather, and one of the first things he asked me, what you give my son to sign it? So I'm like, yo, Mr. Mayweather, we're not here to talk business, but, if Floyd give me permission, no, Daddy, we ain't here for that. We ain't here for that.
That's Floyd Jr. said.
Yeah, that's Floyd Jr. So bam, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're not here for that, right? So somebody passed him the glasses. And
They passed Floyd Sr. the glass?
yeah, passed him the glasses, and he said, he seemed to like be getting angry. Man, I don't care if somebody put a bullet in the back of my head, something to that. And then he stood up, and started like, walking my way, right? And, I'm sitting there in that meeting, I'm always kind of prepared and ready for, I just got him trained that way, right? So as I seen him, come my way, I say, Mr. Mayweather, sir, I say, you seem to be getting angry. I say, but I want you to know I can't take no punches.
Can't take no punches.
So that was my way of letting them know, I'm not a nice person to be, you think you finna tee off on, it ain't gonna go right. And Floyd, he overstood that, and Floyd stood up. Floyd like, no, and Floyd started taking his jacket off.
What Floyd gonna do?
Yeah, Floyd and then squared up. I'm like, whoa.
So you say Floyd got up, took his jacket off.
Yeah,
To
Floyd.
do something to Floyd Sr.?
Well, he got up letting him know, my reading of it is you got to come through me. You know what I mean? If you think, and which I think was a really wise decision, you know what I mean? Because I think Floyd kind of knew, how I was sitting there. Yeah. And I know it would be better for them to fight if they had to fight than for that man to tee off on me that day. You know what I mean? So I end up standing between them, and I'm like, yo, let's go. We didn't come here for this.
What's Bob and them doing when this is going on?
Oh, Bob them at that point to turn red. Stop it. Stop it. You know what I mean? But it had then already hit that point of no return, So I'm like, yo, let's go, man.
And I think Floyd was 130 or 135 at that time?
130.
So from what I remember, what we talked about, the money went up. The HBO license fees, everything went up exponentially when you came into the picture. And to me, that moment, you tell me if I'm wrong, that moment or around that time was the catalyst of you going from just being a good fighter to now you becoming a businessman, and I'm gonna help you get there.
Oh yeah, no, that was from day one. You know, I was expressing to him and setting him up to be a businessman. But what had happened, where that whole, you know, I caught flack from Floyd calling I think a $12 million deal that HBO had offered him a slave contract. And the people at HBO, Seth Abraham, all these guys, Luda Bella, they was highly upset about that situation. So what I done was, I'm trying to like put that fire out. So I went and met with the head of HBO at the time because I wanted to know, how do we get above and beyond this contract that y'all offering him? He's not happy with that. So how do we, give me the tools to get past that? Because that was my mechanism of being in business with him, is improving the deal. And after having a long conversation and listening to Seth, you know, like really express himself being upset about him publicly calling that a slave contract, he said something real interesting to me that, you know, I left with that was, I think, life-changing for Floyd. And that was that Diego Corrales. You know, if y'all knock Diego Corrales off, or you fight Diego Corrales, this contract can be double and up from there. And that's what, you know, I left there with, and that's what I had to sell to Floyd. You know what I mean? I'm like, yo, you say this is a slave contract, but here's how we can get past that and take your career to a whole different level.
And it was a sale because Floyd didn't want to fight Diego Corrales at first.
Yeah, man, I went over Floyd's house about 10 or 11 that night, and I talked to Floyd for probably 4 hours or better, trying to convince him to fight Diego Corrales, and Floyd was telling me that it's not the right time. No, Jay. No, it ain't the right time for that right now. I'm like,
You want that right there.
yeah, you know what I mean? I'm like, man, it's perfect timing, Floyd. I'm like, yo, I done studied this dude, man. He got a case right now, you know, with his ex-wife or fiance, you know, he done jumped on her.
Got a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah, I'm like, he distracted. I say, and most of all, we got a marketing concept for it. We can say we're gonna whoop him for all the battered women in the United States of America. So I'm selling, you know, all of this to him, trying to convince him, you know, and plus you can beat him. You know, I always felt like he could beat him. So I left there with him not wanting to fight Diego, and I came home in the same house and went to sleep and woke up, and he had left me a message saying, okay, Jay, okay, man, I hired you to be my manager, man. If you think we should do it, I'm with it, let's do it.
Okay.
And I rejoiced, but joy only to find out that HBO, you know, they were still kind of tripping, and they were saying, oh, well, we should do this next year. And this was, I think this was David Tour and Lennox Lewis fight that we had went to during that time in some kind of way. So I came up, me coming from the hip hop culture, I never was able to get radio and video. So I used to have to figure out how to use publicity to sell records. So I brought that blueprint to the boxing world. And during that fight, I came up with the plan. I told Floyd, I said, we're gonna go to this fight. Diego Corrales is gonna be at this fight. Here's what I want you to do. You know, I'm gonna have the homies surround Diego Corrales at the press conference. And I want you to push him, and we're gonna break it up. Because I felt like that would get enough publicity to kind of make people want that fight. And it happened just that way. You know, he pushed Diego, we broke it up. That was a Saturday, I think that Monday or something. Front page in the sports of Las Vegas, Floyd and Diego, and shortly after I got a call from HBO saying, we got a date.
Mm-hmm. Did they make good on the money, doubling that contract?
Well, yeah, it positioned us to do it. It wasn't a one-fight situation.
You needed to win
but
that to get this.
Yeah, we was able to skip the line and went uphill from there.
One of his best performances.
Oh yeah, it took him to a whole different level.
It's one of his best performances.
Yeah.
What is it about being around Floyd? You know, young Floyd and old Floyd got a lot of the same similarities, but young Floyd was more wild. But what was it about him that you being around him where people you could say, man, this is why he became who he became?
His work ethic. You know, Floyd work ethic was, I would compare him to the Bionic Man. You know what I mean? Because, you know, I was pretty good at staying up late and doing different things, you know, coming from the entertainment industry. But this dude had an energy, man, that was kind of abnormal.
No drugs, no
No
alcohol.
drugs, no alcohol, just, if anything, I saw him eating them candies all the time, a sugar high or something. But this dude, man, we would go and party, we would go and do things, a lot of things that people that drink and get high do, but this dude would do all of that and then come home and take off running, you know, 6-8 miles, and he was bionic, man. So his work ethic was second to none. You know, he would, you know, come in that gym and give it his all. You know, he wasn't like the type of guy that would spar and be in a rush to leave. He gonna spar, he gonna hit the bags, he gonna
Mitts.
do it all like he loved it.
Yeah, the youngsters don't know. He kept his running shoes, and it's how he would leave the club 4 or 5 in the morning and go run 10 miles going home.
Yeah, no, he was a beast, man. So everything that he accumulated, he deserved, you know, from his work ethic, that he was relentless with his work ethic.
Man, y'all had a good thing. From your perspective, why would you say that relationship didn't last longer?
I say it didn't last because of the people around him. You know what I mean? It's always a challenge when you help someone get to a different level. There's always a challenge with individuals that's around you wanting your position. You know what I mean? And trying to like devalue you or different things with their words, and it's only the strong, you know what I mean? The strong could stand that test of time, you know, because it's coming. You know, anybody where y'all reach a certain level of success together, the divide and conquer is coming, like automatic.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's what divided us. You know, I think that was a major part of it, and from there, you know, hey, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you your flowers, man, because I don't think that Floyd becomes who he becomes without that period in his life. And there's a lot more stuff we ain't even getting into right now where you know, with the spending habits and just teaching him, man, you can't do that, man. Man, look, you gotta save you gotta do certain things. And you can only teach a person so much. They gotta wanna pick it up and run with it. But that foundation,
Yeah.
and not even just what you told him, it's what you showed him.
Oh yeah. The most important part that I think that I shared with Floyd is how to save his life. You know what I mean? I really believe if he hadn't learned certain things, they would have killed him out here in Vegas.
The way he moved.
Yeah, no doubt
Flossing.
about it.
Yeah, because Vegas is a melting pot.
Yeah, and you know, it's an art to knowing how to move, and you know, the calculation and the thoughts and different things that go into moving, and he got that. You know what I mean? I think it was life-saving for him.
How was he moving before you laced him?
Just wide open, you know, wide open, and had a lot of enemies here in Vegas. You know, a lot of street gang enemies out here in Vegas that, you know, I feel like I contribute to making peace with, and also teaching them how to move where, you know, it wouldn't be as attractive for one to try and do something to you because they know consequences was coming afterwards.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I extend that to you, man, because I know a lot of them stories, and even the ones we ain't even touching right now. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to get your flowers on that one. When did Roy come into the picture? Because you didn't manage where you advised him.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Roy, man, was my brother, man. we connected. I went to his fight. Who he fought? Reggie Johnson.
In Houston.
Yeah,
Next
oh
time.
man, we went to a fight. I think we had a whole lot of the ward there. And them guys was, you know, chanting, fifth ward. And Roy let loose one of them pieces, man, and looked at us. Say, man, y'all don't start that. You know what I mean? And afterwards, you know, he and I had an opportunity to kick it and like really tap into one another on how we love the same things. You know what I mean? Roy, a country boy.
Pete Cola.
Yeah, 50% of me is country, the other 50 is city. So it was like really interesting to meet somebody that had all of those loves, you know, chickens and hunting and fishing and all that kind of stuff, you know, was concerned.
What type of run was that though? When Roy was on that run, man, you was right there with him. Like, what that run feel like, being right next to him?
It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful to, Roy is a good dude. He always had a good heart. You know what I mean? A big heart, a good dude. And the run it was amazing to see him because he worked hard as well. You know what I mean? He worked hard. So to witness him in the different camps and to see how he would execute and that speed that he had was
Different.
Man, really different. Really different, man. Because I believe Roy was faster than Floyd. When I would see Roy, you know, with that hand speed hitting them bags, I'm like, yo, I thought Floyd was faster than him, but this dude faster than Floyd. Yeah.
Did they ever connect? Because they seemed like they was it was respect, but they never really embraced each other.
Yeah, no, I never, it never was a big connection there. Roy gave me some wisdom where fighters was concerned, man, you know, and it was, I remember this situation with James Page and Floyd. You know, we was all out here in Vegas, and James Page went to get in the car with me and Floyd, no, Page, you can't get in here. And Page, you know, they had kind of been clashing a little bit, you know, Senior and James Page and all of that, and Page like, man, I'm tired of you, you know, jugging at me, man. You know, I'll whoop your Floyd, who me? You whoop me? Oh. We're taking his jewelry. Hold this, Jay. So they get out under the MGM, finna square off, and I had the homies to stop them. I'm like, yo, man, y'all kill it, man. We ain't finna do that, man.
Yeah,
But
James
yeah.
Page, people don't know James Page from Pittsburgh, California, out where I'm from.
Yeah.
Man, if he couldn't do nothing else, that man could hit like a mule.
Oh, man, he hit like a mule, man. But Floyd, you know, he had a way of when fighters that's close to his fighting weight would come
Agitating.
around, yeah, it was almost like a size you up type of thing,
yeah,
you know.
for
I remember
sure.
another incident. Me, him, Vernon Forrest was riding in Vegas. And Floyd was driving, and all of a sudden Floyd told me, say, yo, Jay, I'm gonna beat everybody at 135, I'm gonna beat everybody at 140, then I'm gonna come up and beat everybody at 147. So I'm sitting back, I'm like, yeah. Oh, I'm gonna beat everybody at 147 too.
Vernon like, hold on, dog, that's my weight class. What you talking about?
You know what I mean? Floyd emphasized that 2 or 3 times, man. And at that point, I know he's jugging, you know, and Vernon back there quiet. I'm finna strike a deal with Vernon, right?
Yeah.
We negotiate. Man, Vernon got out of the car, man. We was walking back to the MGM. Like, man, don't never take me around that dude, man. No more in life, man. Woo. I ain't hear no more from Vernon.
Man, you and Floyd used to have these stay-up competitions to see who could stay up all night, who's gonna fall asleep first.
I mean, it was natural. You know, I'm nocturnal, so, you know, I could hang with him to a certain extent. But, man, when it started getting daylight and he kick in a whole nother gear of
that second
energy,
wind, yeah.
you know, I'm looking at him like, yo, what's up with this dude, man? This dude will come home and jump in a swimming pool, start swimming laps. You know, after we done came out of the club and it's daylight, I'm like, yo, this dude got a different kind of energy going on.
Different.
Yeah.
Man, I want to hear your side of the story on this. So I talked to Roy about this thing. You know, Roy moved up to heavyweight.
Yeah.
Fought John Ruiz, went up all these different weight classes. I was at that fight. And I was in an all-gold suit, man. I think I had just came back from the Olympics, or I think I just came back.
Yeah.
Or was about to go, 1 or 2. I think I just came back. Man, Roy become the heavyweight champion of the world, WBA heavyweight champion of the world.
Yeah.
You don't go back down when you done came up.
Right.
And from what me and you have talked about, you said, Roy said he remembers it different.
Yeah.
You said, man, I had Tyson right where we wanted him. And Tyson wasn't really Tyson at that time. Still dangerous, though.
Right.
You wanted him to go fight Tyson next, get a big bag, and then figure out what you want to do next. But don't go fight Antonio Tarver.
Yeah.
What's your recollection of the Tyson potential deal that was on the table?
Right. Now, you know, I ain't took no punches. So my memory might be a little different. I'd heard some of Roy's thing, and that's the homie, and you know, I don't know how it may have, you know, be this different, but here's what I remember. Like, I remember me and Roy, you know, having a conversation about that fight first, and Roy was telling me Tyson never would, nobody could get Tyson to the table. So I'm like, oh, okay, you know, once again, I'm like, oh, that's an opportunity, right? So I reach out to Mike, and of course, Mike, you know, accept the invitation. So I bring Mike to Houston. I tell Roy, yo, I got Mike to agree to come to Houston. Let's have a conversation. Let's go out to my ranch, just us, and we're gonna have a conversation and make this fight happen. He's like, yeah, you got him. I'm like, yeah, I got him, man. I got the tickets. He coming.
This after Ruiz or before?
Yeah, this after
Okay.
Ruiz. So Mike show up, Roy show up. We all drive out to the ranch. You know, is evidence of the picture where I'm holding both of their hands up, and we went in the office and, you know, talked about making that fight.
Oh, that picture you got downstairs, that was that day?
That's at my ranch. So we talked about, you know, making that fight, and we left out there with a meeting of the minds to make that fight happen. Maybe 2 times. You know what I mean?
Mike said, we could do it twice, brother.
yeah, brother. You know, Mike was body then, man. So from there, you know, we even started like doing the marketing. I remember the Source Magazine Hip Hop Awards, where, you know, I arranged for Mike and Roy to announce that they was fighting at the Source Hip Hop Awards. That's another picture that can be verified. And from there, me and Roy decided to bring the Malute brothers in, the owners of the Poem at the time, and I think the Sacramento Kings, because we wanted, you know, our thing was, let's get a guaranteed $25 million for each of us, because it's gonna do well, you know, on the pay-per-view
I was gonna go
as
crazy
well.
on pay-per-view.
Yeah. So that was, you know, what I remember us having in mind, and I remember me and Roy taking a meeting with the Malute brothers, one or two of them. And the 25 was, I think, the deal breaker, because they didn't want to guarantee the 25, but they mentioned 17. You know what I mean? And to me, I'm like, yo, we can get the other off the pay-per-view. That's not gonna mean as much, you know, not getting that guaranteed there, because this is gonna be a huge, you know what I mean, pay-per-view fight. And somewhere between the weight of that taking place, you know, I remember Roy telling me, man, I'm gonna go ahead and take this Tarver fight. You know, I done took his best punch. I'm gonna see if he can take mine. Something to that sort. And my thing was, man, you know, this is a bird in the hand. This big money here, Roy. You know what I mean? Why? But, you know, you have to respect the decision that a man decided to make, and that's how that went, you know, from my recollection. And we know, you know, what happened. You know, Tarver caught him with one, you know, and I saw all that fly out the window. Yeah.
I think the John Ruiz fight was 10 million guaranteed. I don't know what about the upside, but I know that the Tarver fight was 5, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere around 5 or something like that. You remember what the number?
I don't remember. No, I thought it was like 4, but
Okay.
it could have been.
And then what happened.
Yeah.
When you starting to see this fallout, Tarver 1 happened. Roy Eek by, he dig it out. They go back again, and then Tarver shocked the world
Yeah.
by stopping Roy Jones. And then you see Glenn Johnson.
Yeah.
You know, I was in Memphis at that time. I told Roy this story, man. It was one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah.
It felt like somebody died.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and you seeing this? What you thinking? What you thinking?
After that heavyweight fight with Ruiz, something was lost, you know, where his speed was concerned, maybe in his legs or something, you know, something didn't come back the same as he was before that heavyweight. So I think, you know, putting on that weight really, like, it done something. I don't know how to, from a scientific point of view, I don't know how to explain it, but he never was the same fighter after that. And Roy, to me, his speed was like the key to who he was, you know, being successful, because Roy always had like a lot of bad habits from a defense perspective as a fighter, but he was so fast, nobody could really catch him with certain things because of his speed. And when that left, then, you know, he was able to be caught with a lot of things that he wouldn't have been caught with the speed. That's the way I feel about it.
Was you advising him when it started getting to a point where the knockouts start accumulating? Was you still there?
I'm always there with Roy. You know what I mean? I'm always there. I'm always, you know, giving my honest opinion, you know, on what I feel, if he's asked me different things or whatnot. But, you know, Roy's strong-minded. You know what I mean? Just like all of us. And, you know, I just had to be there as a brother for him every time. You know, I'm rooting for him.
I'm gonna switch gears a little bit as we winding it down. You know, my first recollection of me and you talking was, man, you found me in a trap house, man.
Yeah.
I'm talking about landline. I ain't talking about cell phone. I'm talking about landline.
Yeah.
You found me in a trap house, man. Yeah. And I don't know to this day how that happened.
Yeah.
You know, I had and I'm gonna let you give your side in a second, but you know, I was struggling, man. I lost my daddy. I was in the streets. I was in and out. And the boxing thing wasn't really exciting to me no more. I had given my whole life to do that, and I was over it, really.
Right.
But, you know, Verge, my trainer, my godfather, he pulling on me. You know, he like, man, come on. And what I would do is I'd qualify, beat everybody to get to these nationals. And at that time, I wouldn't show up to the nationals. I'm in the thick of being in the streets. And they had the Golden Gloves Nationals in Vegas. And I believe, you know, I don't know if it was UNT, but you showed up. So let me see this kid Ward, man. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And somehow you got in touch with Verge, and y'all had a conversation, and Verge said, man, if you help me with this kid, he gonna bring us a gold medal. And I remember being on the phone with you, tripping out like, man, I don't know how y'all, because I was ducking Verge. Verge couldn't get me. But somehow I got on the phone with you, and I remember telling you everything I was going through, saying, man, I had a baby, man, and you know, I'm trying to figure out, I was a kid, 17 years old or something like that. And I'm telling you all my issues. I had some legal issues at the time. And I remember you said, man, we're gonna take care of all the misdemeanor problems.
Yeah.
You said, but you gotta get back in the ring because God gave you a gift.
Yeah.
You remember that phone call?
Yeah, yeah. I remember that one, and I remember how it all came to fruition before then. This guy, Cameron Duncan, you know, rest in peace, Cameron Duncan. I was having a conversation with him about amateurs, and he mentioned you. And he just kind of mentioned, oh, he's a great fighter, and he went on to the other fighters. But in my mind, I'm like, it just like registered with me for some reason. And after I got off the phone, I'm like, yo, who is this Andre Ward? Because I didn't let him know what I was finna do, but it meant something to me for some reason, because based on how he like put it, this guy can really fight, but whoop whoop, he wouldn't show up and he's not dependable. Like, okay. So I done my due diligence, and I ended up calling Verge. And he and I, you know, we talked for a while, feeling one another out. And after we, you know, I think came to the mutual respect of, you know, feeling one another out, Verge, you know, he told me, he said, man, he said, if you help me with this kid, he'll win us a gold medal. I'm like, yeah. And my first thought was, I need to see him. You know what I mean? I want to see this. One thing, hearing about it, everybody brag about how, you know, every fighter you talk to say, I'm a killer, and they trainer say he's a killer. They can been and lost 100 fights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, I need to see this. And that's when you and I spoke, and ultimately you came to Houston, and I think we put you in the ring with a guy, a heavyweight, like 15 and 0 or something.
Yeah, we sparred with a heavyweight, and I sparred with another dude in there named Iron Man.
Yeah.
Iron Man was a cold piece. I'm in there with everything. He keep on coming. Come on, youngster. Come on, youngster.
Yeah. But, you know, I left there a believer because how you dismantled both of them was like unreal to me. I'm like, they can't even hit him. You know what I mean? And it was just amazing to see somebody that young do what you had done to a pro. And from there, you know, my mindset was, let's equip him, you know, and put him in a situation where he can focus and won't, you know, have to be distracted, you know, where important things like family is concerned, because that's important. That's why a lot of people end up in penitentiaries around the world. That's why a lot of people end up dying. That's why a lot of things go on with us, you know, in the hoods, because a lot of people, you know, feel that way about their families and want to provide some kind of way. And too often, too soon, you know, a lot of people do it the wrong way, and it costs them. But you know, one thing about you gave your word to me that, yo, we can take care of this, I get focused on this, you got my all. You know what I mean? And you never deviated from that.
Yeah. Man, I was talking to all of them, man. I was talking to Cameron Duncan, Shelly Finkel, you know. They was in hot pursuit. And but what was different about you is I couldn't really relate to them. You know, I couldn't relate to them. But when I would come to Houston for the first couple times, and man, I'm seeing how you move it, and I'm seeing the respect you got, and I'm seeing the cars you drive, and I'm seeing the houses you living in, but I'm seeing the homies and the respect. You know, it wasn't like these dudes, even though they work for you, it wasn't like they was workers. It was like, man, they really love this man.
Yeah.
And then they embraced me.
Yeah.
And it felt like a family situation. So the other guys, I said this in my book, you know, they didn't have a shot. Because I'm a young kid that's impressionable, and I'm in the streets, and I'm seeing somebody that came out of the streets. We share the same faith, and it just, you were speaking my language. And but you also wasn't intimidated by what I was going through.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, you was unimpressed by it. You know, you call them misdemeanor problems.
Yeah.
And I think that was it for me, you know, and from that point on, man, I just needed to rededicate my life to God and get, you know, them bad habits out of my system and heal from the stuff I had been going through. And man, I kept my word.
Yeah.
You know, I kept my word, man. I went to Greece, and we were rocking all the way, you know, from the time we met all the way through the Olympics I was in, we turned pro. But man, I kept my word. I brought that gold medal back, and then you know, we locked in a situation, and you became my manager.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had a tremendous run, man. And you know, one of the things I'm most grateful for is the business aspect of the game that I learned.
Yeah.
You know, you remember this, you know, I used to get real upset, man. You know, you have an HBO or somebody, man, you're our guy, we love you. Okay, man, we'll talk to us next week and send us the offer.
Yeah.
The offer don't match the talk. And I, you know, being young in business, I'm taking it personal.
Right.
Man, how they gonna offer this? Man, they just said I was their guy, they wanted to build around me. And I remember you showing me, hold on, relax. It's just the first offer.
Yeah.
We gonna get what we need to get. We just gotta figure out how to do it. And I learned to take a step back, take a deep breath, and then use my mind and allow God to help me with strategy.
Right.
Okay, well, y'all say this, but what about you say this ain't possible, but why not? So that's one of the things, man, I'm most grateful for in our relationship, because I use that to this day. Yeah. I don't care, you know, I had a person tell me the other day, somebody I'm in business with, man, you know, you never get what you want, you know, you never get what you deserve. And I had to stop him. I said, no, I don't believe that. I don't operate like that.
Right.
I believe that I'm gonna get what's coming to me, what's mine, and I feel like I'm gonna get what I'm supposed to get.
Yeah.
I don't even think like that. I don't even let that enter my mind. So I live by that to this day. But I want to jump to the Super Six, man. We you know, it's this tournament with these 6 fighters and promoters coming together. And I remember I'm in Mexico on vacation, and it's starting to build steam. And I'm talking to you, and you like, Dre, I don't think it's gonna happen. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going on vacation, but it's forming quickly. So I'm seeing little reports online and stuff like, man, these dudes they're gonna do the kickoff press conference in New York. And then you like, Dre, I don't think it's gonna happen. And then Verge, he said, man, it's gonna happen. Right? Then we ended up coming together, and it was Verge like, man, you missed the first. He said, look, you gotta get to Germany for the second leg of this press conference, man. You can't, if you let this pass you by, man, you're gonna regret it.
Right.
I remember I had a double ear infection. I'm sick. I had to drive to the airport, drive my family all back home, and get to Germany to announce this fight. But when my deal was done, I was the only one that didn't travel internationally.
Right.
But I never asked you and Josh, you know, our good friend and my lawyer that's been with me for a long time. I never told y'all I didn't want to travel.
Right.
How did y'all position me with that Super 6 negotiation to keep everything at home?
Yeah, that was a strategy that we had. We felt it was risky, and we didn't trust you being in the hands of the judges and different things overseas, because a lot of those promoters, you know, I felt they had leverage there. So one of the ways that I remember us positioning you to do that is by taking the fight. What's the guy name?
Kessler.
Kessler, the one
He was the baddest one in the 6.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So we, you know, took the big bad wolf and positioned you, you know, because they felt like, oh, that would be your last thing, right? You know, and none of that would matter no more, because you would be out. So we took on the big bad wolf, and we know what happened. You know, we all witnessed what you done to the big bad wolf, but that was the leveraging tool that really gave us the leverage to not have to go over there at all.
And he was so arrogant that he just accepted fighting in Oakland.
Oh yeah, no,
He couldn't
all
see
of
it.
them, his whole team, everybody, all the other fighters, they wouldn't say it today, but everybody felt like he would beat you. Yeah.
Man, as we march through the Super 6, you know, in boxing, it's almost inevitable you're gonna have some trouble.
Yeah.
It ain't when, it ain't if, it's when and how often.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, I'm gonna start with our situation that you talked about in our book. You know, we probably had 2 dust-ups in life in all the years I've been knowing you.
Yeah.
Around trying to get this paperwork right and the language right in these contracts.
Right.
But, you know, we had disputes about the contract. We saw it different. I ended up filing a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Which was big for me, man, because, you know, I'm like, man, I had so much respect for you, but I was also fighting for my respect.
Right.
And you saw it different. You like, man, it ain't nothing to fight for. This contract is valid. I'm like, nah, no, it's not.
Right.
And I remember, I knew you had been served with the contract, but I hadn't heard from you, so I'm waiting on it. I'm waiting. I said, it's coming. I don't know when you're gonna show up, but it's coming. And I remember it's like 2 a.m, man. I see my phone ring. It's private number.
Yeah.
I said, here we go. So I say, hello? He said, yeah. So I knew who it was. I'm like, who is this? he said, they called me James Prince. I said, oh man, here we go, man. He said, what's this here with this lawsuit that I got here, man? I said, man, Jay, I've been trying to tell you, man, it's da-da-da. I'm going through my whole thing. And you said, man, we ain't supposed to be suing each other, man. We Christians, man. I said, I know. I've been trying to explain this. I've been talking to you the whole time.
Yeah.
And you said, okay, well, I need to go see what I gotta do now. I need to go figure this out. So boom. We both filed and thankfully it didn't get to the press. It stayed under the radar.
Right.
But something happened, you know. There's a couple months passed or whatever. And you called me and you said, man, are you willing to meet with your pastor?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you and your pastor flew to Oakland and met with me and my pastor. And my pastor, man, just basically, man, what you want, Dre? What you trying to get out of this? Well, Dre, what you want? He just, he mediated it from a godly standpoint. We stayed there 3-4 hours.
Right.
But when we left out of there, we had a new deal.
Yeah.
What you remember from that time?
Oh man, I remember it just like that, you know what I mean? And I think it was so different the way we handled that. It was so like abnormal and unusual. I never heard of that happening, you know, and I witnessed like a mini deals, but I never heard it being done that way, where we use our faith to come together with, our pastors. We listen to those guys every Sunday, and we believed in the word. So what better mediators to have before us where we was in disagreement? And, those guys came together, man. It was harmony. It wasn't nobody was trying to hustle nobody like lawyers, do when they in the room with one another. And we left out of there, man, with a whole new journey. And we've been together ever since.
Man, we got stronger.
Yeah.
And you said in your book that at first you took the lawsuit that I filed as disrespect, but you
Yeah.
realized that I was just trying to get my respect.
Yeah. No, I agree with that to this day, you know what I mean? Because originally when I saw it, I'm like, yo, what is the dude doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As I say, we brothers in Christ. And but at the same time, in retrospect, when you look at it, you was trying to be heard. And I was a deaf ear where that was concerned, because we two strong-minded individuals that felt like we was both right. And we both could have been right, but that wasn't the point. You know what I mean? The point was figuring out how to move forward in harmony. So we, got the tools that was necessary, that was attached to our faith. Matter of fact, our whole career was based off of that. You know what I mean? From that day forward, I knew you were different. I knew you was a fighter that was connected. So I'm always like, Dre, how the spirit leading you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, how the spirit,
You
because
always said that.
I want to be in obedience to how the spirit was leading you. And then from there, I don't care who it was, y'all bring it on, I'm with him. You know what I mean? And that's the way we rocked out.
We got stronger after that, man, and then, not long after that, we found ourselves in another dispute with the promoter, and we can't get too much into it, but not the details of that, but just everything we was dealing with. What do you remember from that time, and even how you saw me dealing with that? Because I'm out the ring for 2 years.
Yeah, that was tough. You know what I mean? That was tough because, I understand the importance of a fighter being active, and I understand the time, like no other businesses, you have a time slot to do what you have to do. So when we had to lock arms and go to war, with the promoter, it's something that I was just with you on. I didn't care, how nobody looked at it. You know what I mean? Once again, we wanted that respect. We wanted to go to the next level. We wanted to do things, and I'm like, let's roll. And we done just that, and we became victorious.
Tell me about the Rock Nation thing, whatever you can share, because, I'm grateful, man, that I learned the business, like business in general, how to manage my money, because for 2 years, money going out, ain't no money coming in. But I didn't panic. And I also didn't allow myself to be put in a situation that a lot of fighters get put into, where even though you may have a real solid argument, but you can't fight your position because you need money.
Yeah.
And as soon as that promoter or somebody know, the network know you need money, you lose all the strength that you had, because you got to fight.
Right.
I wasn't in that position, even though it wasn't a comfortable season for me, but Rock Nation come around, man, and I made, and I say this a lot, in 3 years,
Yeah.
than what I did the first 10 years of my career.
Yeah.
Like, God gave me double for my trouble.
Yeah.
How did the Rock Nation thing come about? Because it wasn't on my radar.
Yeah. No, it wasn't even on Rock Nation radar. That came about one night in Houston. Me and Jay-Z was in the club together with a few other artists, and I planted the seed of them getting into boxing, and he embraced that. So it was a follow-up from that seed being planted, and when opportunity presented itself with, our thing that we was going through, because we was, you know what I mean, even though with them not being in the picture, we was still fighting.
We was fighting, yeah.
You know what I mean? We spending our own money fighting. So after speaking with him and following up on that, with a few other conversations, I was able to convince him to come in and, become a promoter, with Rock Nation. Probably done it for other reasons as well, but for sure, I know he embraced us based on our relationship. And as you say, it was a real fruitful relationship, and all the litigation and all of that, was settled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about them last 2 fights that I had. When you first started hearing about Kovalev and HBO, like, that's who they wanted me to fight.
Yeah, he was the boogeyman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Once again, Kovalog was the boogeyman. He had beat Bernard Hopkins. He had beat,
He going to do his home country, stopping them.
and he was beating them with, knockouts. Yeah. This dude was the boogeyman. So, yeah, we welcome that situation. We done the negotiation around it that, we all left the table happy, and from there you delivered.
I mean, we did so good that, in the build up to the fight, Kathy Dude, I mean, I ain't never heard a promoter get mad at us for what we making.
Yeah.
Like, you need to give your fighter more. Or
Yeah.
figure that out over there. Hey, I can't believe they made this. Like, why you mad at what we making?
Yeah.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, well, not publicly the way she done it. So she had to really be mad to blurt that out, amongst the public like that. But, all of us put our head together, and, that was your worth at the time. All the sacrifices that you had made prior to getting to them meant something. And, when we went to that table, it was only fair for them to compensate you.
Man, that first fight, what you thinking when I go down in that second round?
Whoa. It wasn't so much of how you went down. I was glad to see you get up. But, to see you go down like that, I didn't, it was kind of nerve-wracking. But when I saw you get up, like not wobbling all over the place, then I knew you knew how to adjust. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we get, we had it's always a fight, but we had to fight a little bit to get the money up for the second fight, which is normal in the sport.
Yeah.
And did you have any idea that might be my last fight?
Nah.
It wasn't even on your radar?
No, not at all. I didn't, I was kind of shocked to hear that. I was shocked to hear that. And, when you told me that, you was, kind of confirmed it to me that, this was a high calling from up above. You know what I mean? Like the Spirit of God. And my thing was, what God is saying this to you?
I think you said something like that when I called. Like, what spirit? You sure? You sure you checked up? Make sure it's the right spirit. Yeah. I think you said something like that.
But
you said what God?
Yeah. So I understand though, for you to be taking that position like that, I had to come, to the reality and like, okay, he's serious. You know what I mean? It's the same spirit I've been asking him about his whole career. How your spirit, what it's saying to you. So ain't no need of like acting like it's a different spirit now that it's over. You know what I mean? It's the same one.
You had to check though.
Yeah.
And I remember, first of all, let me say this and I'm gonna get back to that. Like, coming back that second fight and closing it out like that and leaving no doubt. Like, what was that feeling for you? I felt like that was a win for us.
Oh man, a big win for us. You know what I mean? If I would have known that was the last fight, then it would have even been, I could have like put it all, this is the end and this is even, but to see, the way you went out and the way you destroyed this dude the last fight, man, was, I live with that joy today. You know what I mean? I'm proud of that moment. I'm proud of our journey. And for you to put the stamp on it the way you put the stamp on it, to me is just confirmation, man, of what, the Creator had planned. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, I the day I called you, man, I ain't want to call you. I think you was one of the last ones I called. I said, boy, this is going to be tough. it's gonna be tough. Cause I knew it was left field, you know.
Yeah.
I knew it was left field, and I had been feeling it for the last couple of years, dealing with injuries and just, you know, this thing, the sport just start weighing on you because I really went about my craft a certain kind of way. Like I didn't play with it, and that, you know, you make it look easy, but that sacrifice,
Yeah.
keeping your weight down, leaving your family, you on vacation, like, man, I can't eat that. I gotta, all of that for 20-something years, man, it start to add up.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I did make the call, you know, I could tell you were shocked,
Yeah.
but you shifted quickly, man, and you showed support.
Yeah.
And you showed support this last 7, 8 years. You know,
Yeah.
not one time have you said, man, you gotta come back, you gotta figure this out. You said, man, whatever you wanna do, I'm gonna support you, man.
Yeah. Yeah, because I understood, man, that it was a higher power talking to you. You know, when a man, like, our walk and our journey, you know, as Christians, man, we're tested. And when that much money is being offered and you know the possibilities of being able to make 25, 50 million or whatever, and you stand stern, you stand strong where your faith is concerned, that means something that's much stronger than just lip service. You know what I mean? And that's the type of guy that you have been the whole journey. You know what I mean? You didn't just talk the talk, you walked the walk. And I was inspired by that, you know what I mean? I gained strength from that, you know, because that's real as it get. You know what I mean? A whole lot of people talk about it, you know, talk the talk, but when you walking the walk, more is caught than taught, man. And none of that mattered with you where the spirit was concerned when it was speaking to you.
Man.
And that's the type of man that you are and the type of man you always been that I witnessed. Yeah.
Man, I gotta end on that note, man. That's
Yeah.
where we gotta leave it right
All
there.
good, bro.
Man, I appreciate you, man. Another episode of the Art of War. I appreciate y'all for stopping by, man. We're gonna see y'all next time.